Hello students, I am Dr. L.K. Das, Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Department of HSS, IIT Roorkee. Welcome to another lecture of the NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. Today's learning goals are to understand what is a nation, how do nations form and why print matters. And in this, we are going to look at the Benedict Anderson's core arguments. Why Benedict Anderson? As I had discussed in the previous class, that there are different ways through which nationalism and nation has been understood. Some understood nations and nationalism in terms of modernity, some understood in terms of development, some understood in terms of cultural matters, some understood it in terms of ethnic identities, so on and so forth. But there was a crucial point that I had discussed in the previous class about communication and media, and I promised you that in today's class we are going to elaborate on it as to how print, how media became a force identifier or a force multiplier in our understanding of nations and nationalism. And in this, Benedict Anderson and his work Nation as an Imagined Community becomes a very significant contribution. As a matter of fact, unlike many other works, Anderson's work has completely revolutionized the way we understand nation, the way we understand nationalism, the way we understand the non-naturalness of nationalism and nation, or the social and political and cultural constructs of it. So let us begin. So what Anderson is trying to do is that first of all he is trying to place his own arguments within a specific framework. He starts with the 19th and 20th centuries, particularly what happened in the 19th century, the rise of Germany, the rise of England, the rise of France, so on and so forth in the Western context, and particularly in the post 1945 period in the colonial contexts, because between 1945, when the Second World War ended, and 1960s, most of the colonial or most of the colonized regions of the world had become independent nations. And when they became independent nations, they had particular arguments why they wanted to become independent and why they did not want to remain under the sovereignty, suzerainty, or any kind of control of European powers. This was also the time when he was writing his arguments, when both Marxist, Weberian as well as others had a deep impact on our understanding of nation and nationalism. As I had discussed about Anthony Smith, as I had discussed about Ernest Gellner, Keduri and others, they had a mass impact in the way we understood nations and nationalism. But each one of them spoke about the nations and nationalism in a modernist and modernization perspective. And as I said, Marxists considered nationalism as an anathema to class formation and class conflicts. Weber, as we had discussed in the beginning of this course, gave a very significant and powerful definition of state by claiming that a state has monopoly authority over violence or legitimate violence. So where does Anderson's work differ from all of them? Now Anderson is also from the West. It's not that he is from the East or he is from the global South. But unlike many other scholars who were from the global North, they were residing in the global North, they did their research on the global North. Anderson, even if he was from the global North, spent a considerable amount of time studying Southeast Asian countries, and particularly their culture, their history, as well as how these nations came into existence, how nationalism played out in the locations, in these regions of the globe. So unlike others who gave a lot of emphasis on politics, who gave a lot of emphasis on economics, Anderson argued that we need to look at nations and nationalism as a cultural construct. Without culture, there can never be an idea of nation, or there cannot be an idea of nationalism. And we'll discuss the further about these two specific aspects. But before that, let us get into the definition that Anderson is providing us. He calls in a very evocative manner that nation is nothing but an imagined political community. Now, have you ever thought of India as just being a figment of our imagination? Or you have always thought, or we have always known India to exist there? Every country, every nation, as a matter of fact, speaks in that language, that we have always been here. Our history is not that of 100 years or 50 years or 75 years. Rather, our history stretches way back in time for thousands of years. So, in that sense, when somebody calls this idea of nation as an imagined political community, it completely shatters the way a specific category has ever been looked at and has ever been seen or assumed. That's the reason why when Anderson claims that a nation is an imagined political community, we have to disaggregate each aspect of it. We have to look at what is imagined, we have to look at what is political, and we have to look at what is a community separately, and then as a unified whole to see why he is claiming nation to be an imagined political community. Now, he argues that a nation is imagined primarily because members will never meet most fellow members. What does that mean? It means that even if just imagine which is the smallest nation in the world, Vatican City. If Vatican City is the smallest nation on this earth, then do you think every citizen of this Vatican City knows each other face to face, like we know each other if you are part of a village community, or if you are part of a college community, or if you are part of a hostel, or a classroom, or a department? So, this is where the problematic lies. The problematic is that it is right in front of us, but many scholars were unwilling to identify that, which Anderson says that irrespective of the size of a nation or a size of a nation state, no two members will ever know each and every member of that community or of that nation. So, there has to be something that connects these two dots to claim that we are part of a unified whole. The second aspect is that of political. It is political primarily because it has finite boundaries and it has sovereignty claim. Remember our Max Weber? What did he say about a state? When he speaks about state, he speaks about territory of finite boundaries. When he is talking about a state, he is speaking about the role of sovereignty of the state within its territory. So, if this is a state's territory, within this it has absolute sovereignty. And thirdly, we are talking about nation as a community, that means irrespective of whosoever we are, we all think of ourselves as a part and parcel of a particular nation. We think of ourselves as Indians. We think of ourselves as not rich or poor, not Odia or Haryanvi or Kashmiri or Marathi. Rather, we all consider ourselves to be Indians, Bharatiya, or you can use any term for that matter. That is the reason why a nation has deep and horizontal comradeship. There is no hierarchy between the states. Nobody is above us, nobody is below us. So, this is what the three terms, when they come together, create this idea of nation as an imagined political community. I hope you got my point. Now, let us move a little further as to how this imagination is constructed. Now, when I say constructed, keep this in mind, because this is a course on political sociology, and sociology tells us that nothing is natural, even nature is constructed. So, let us see how this imagined political community is imagined in the first place. So, the first argument of Benedict Anderson is that there are social techniques of imagining, and this social techniques is through shared narratives, is through shared rites, shared histories and shared calendars. Now, take a step back and think about what imagination do you have when you sing Vande Mataram, or when you sing Janna Gana Mana. Isn't an idea of its nation emerges in your mind? When somebody is singing about Himalayas, when somebody is singing about the three sides of the Indian subcontinent, surrounded by Bay of Bengal, surrounded by Indian Ocean and surrounded by the Arabian Sea, we have a particular geographical imagination about it. When we read Mahabharata, when we read Ramayana, or when we read our Purans, when we read Jatak Kathas, or when we read about narratives and stories and the songs, folk songs, myths, so on and so forth, we have a certain imagination as to how this entire narrative of a geographical space is being constructed. But we don't take it as a construct, rather what we do is we look at it as, yes, it has always been there. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, India is one. From Nagaland to Dwarka, India is one. So, when we speak in this language, we are creating a particular narrative, and this narrative creates an idea, an imagination of a nation. Secondly, why do we celebrate the 26th January? Why do we celebrate 15th August? Why do we celebrate 2nd October? Or why do we celebrate Holi, Diwali, Dasahara, the Eid and other kind of festivals? We celebrate them because at every point in these celebrations, we find a definite idea about nation. What happens when we look at the rituals that are performed year after year? Remember the songs that you hear on these specific days, particularly when you have a national holiday like the Republic Day or Independence Day. What songs do you hear? Think about it, that most of these songs were written in the 1950s and 1960s. So, what kind of songs people were listening to before that? So, these are rites of passage, and when you celebrate these rituals, these rites, it creates an idea, it creates an imagination for us as to what is a nation. And through this, we are also creating certain histories. The history, as I said, when we look at Mahabharata, when we look at Ramayana, we say that Ram with his wife Sita and his brother Lakshman and many other groups, they walked across the Indian subcontinent and finally reached Lanka. Now this is some scholars have argued that this is a mythology. There is no historical the fact about it. But do we take, when we read, do we take them as just a figment of imagination of some the poet, or do we believe in that? In case we believe in that, how are we believing? Are we believing in terms of geography? Are we believing in terms of culture? Are we believing in terms of our shared heritage? And this shared heritage is constructed through the processes of narratives, through the processes of creating histories. We are proud of our Harappa civilization. Most of us have never been to any of the Harappa sites, but still we are proud of it. Similarly, we are proud of many other things, because a history is created to construct the entire scheme of what is India, what is Bharat, and how Bharat and India they can come together. And one of the most beautiful ways it is created is through the creation of calendars. In one of the classes, we will discuss how calendars in the past 100-120 years became one of the most significant factors for the spread of this imagined community. So keep that in mind, we will discuss about it. That's the reason why I'm not going to discuss or spend much time here on calendars. Now second, apart from the shared narratives, we also have shared symbols. What feeling you have when you hoist the national flag or the national tricolor? What feelings do you have when you hear the national anthem? Or what feelings do you have when you visit Qutub Minar, when you visit Red Fort, or when you visit a place like Jallianwala Bagh, or you visit similar kind of monuments that have been constructed over the past few hundred years or the past few decades. So these are symbols that create an idea of India, that create what a nation is. And this is not just about India, mind you. It is about every nation constructing for itself something that is going to last forever. The third and one of the most crucial aspects is our school curriculum as well as our school curricula and public ceremonies. Now, school education is very significant because we have a standardized idea of a school curricula. Every state government produces year after year a very standard and structured curriculum for every batch of students, and they read those histories, they read those politics, they read those mathematics, they read the cultural aspects of it and believe that this is what a nation is, and this is how our history has spanned over the few thousand years. And these schools also celebrate all the festivities, all the national holidays, national festivals that I just mentioned. So schools produce or reproduce students who are going to be citizens of a particular state, who are going to be citizens of a particular country, and who are going to be citizens of a particular nation or subjects of a particular nation. And with this three, the imagination gets institutionalized. And when something gets institutionalized, that means for decades it does not change and it reproduces itself without much of effort. But all of this would not have happened, according to Benedict Anderson, if not for capitalism, and specifically if not for print capitalism. Why? First and foremost reason is that, particularly in the case of Western Europe, before the printing press was discovered or invented, everything was handwritten. And because everything was handwritten, and so it would take an enormous amount of time to mass produce any form of knowledge. So anybody who had the capability or ability to read and write, they were at the higher echelon of society, or highest echelon of society. And most importantly, they used to communicate with each other in a specific language, and that language used to be Latin. Now, Latin was not spoken by a vast number of people. Like in India, Sanskrit is not spoken by a vast number of people. English is not spoken by a vast number of people. Only a certain percentage of people or population speaks these languages. That way, what print capitalism did was that it realized that if they are going to mass produce something, they require an audience, they require a readership, and this readership must be educated, and this readership must be educated not just in Latin but in their vernacular languages. A vernacular language was English, a vernacular language was Spanish, French, German, so on and so forth. So, for mass market, what print capitalism did was it standardized language, and with a standardized language it created specific grammar, it created very standardized grammar, it created standardized dictionaries, and also it created what words are written and what words are spoken and what words and language is taught in the school. So, specific textbooks were created, specific newspapers were created, specific magazines were created, specific the linguistically standardized constructions were made, and this created a vast market or a mass market for these capitalists. But this is not the end of it. Newspapers, when they write in one specific language and then this language is spread throughout the territory of a particular nation, everybody reads the same stuff, and when they read the same stuff, they have a shared moment, or they feel this they are part of the same moment. Something is happening in Kanyakumari. Say, how many of us actually wait or are aware that on 31st May each year the southwest monsoon hits the coast of Kerala? Most of us have never visited Kerala, but that is an information that we look, that is an information that we share, that is a kind of information that we are all aware of. So, this is what print capitalism, this is what capitalism has done to us. It has given us an imagination which is out there. Even if we are not physically present, still we understand that this is how it is and this is how we are going to work it out. And as I have been saying, The language is very significant here because language in terms of vernacular is significant as with the mass education, translation of a lot of works from Latin to vernacular languages happened. We stabilized specific identities of German German language spoken by the Germans, French language spoken by the French population, and Spanish as a language spoken by the Spaniards. Think about India. How many national languages do we have? Or we don't have any national language. Rather, we have official languages. 22, 23 official languages we have. Because unlike a place like Europe, which is almost the size of India, if you remove the Russia from it, what we see is that we have the linguistic diversity, and this is where the Nehru and others call it unity in diversity, because unlike the Europeans, we did not fight against each other on linguistic nationalism, that because I speak a different language, so I want a different or separate country for myself. So there's a politics to it now. The politics is that when there is language standardization, it excludes certain differences. Now we have on the one hand language, and then we have dialect. So while language is standardized, dialects become a corrupted form of this language. So we are creating hierarchies in which language in terms of Hindi is standard, whereas Braj becomes a dialect. There is a possibility that both of them are languages rather than dialects. Braj as a language, or Braj Bhasha, has a much longer history than that of Hindi. But still, in the hierarchy of national imagination, we have created this hierarchy. At the same time, the other technologies that were also used and implemented were the creation of maps, censuses, and museums. The map of India, map of any country in the world, they are all objects through which our imagination is modulated. Why do we think India looks like this? Or why do we think that any country for that matter looks in a particular way, or any state looks in a particular way? Because there is a lot of work that has gone into the art of cartography, because maps objectify the bounded territories. Censuses also do the same thing, and one of the classes will also understand the how census is very significant and how it created a lot of ideas about who we are and what we have been doing. Same goes with museums. So when you go to any museum for that matter, check out how the curation of history is done and curation of artifacts is done. If you get a chance, go to the National Museum in Delhi. In that National Museum, when you enter, the first thing that you get to see is Harappa civilization. There is a skeleton there, and various artifacts that are located at very significant spots, mostly at our eye level of an average Indian person. So that we are looking at history, we are looking at the national imagination of history from Harappa onwards. If you go to the history, to the museum in Calcutta, look at how it has been created, because while National Museum in Delhi was created during the period of Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, the museum in Calcutta was created by the British. So they had a very significantly different idea of how it ought to be, and the bureaucratic and cultural practices also created an imagination of how it needs to be done. Then comes that we not only look at history from those perspective of what is material, but we also look at death, we also look at horizontal comradeship, which essentially means that how do we celebrate death, and why do we celebrate somebody's death? How do we celebrate time? Time in terms of national time and in terms of dynastic time. In the pre-nascent the system, we had the king or the dynasts. So we look at, okay, this king lived or reigned between these years. Do we speak about India now in that frame, or do we speak about any nation within that framework? Certain areas, yes, it is spoken, but not everywhere. Particularly in the case of Europe, a dynastic time would be called the Victorian age, when Queen Victoria was the Empress of United Kingdom as well as India. But national time is not like that. National time is what time we follow. For example, currently it is if you check out the wristwatch, or the time on your mobile phone, computer, or so wherever you are watching this video, you will find that it is a very specific time because we are falling into a specific time zone. And this time zone is also a national and social and political construct. So, as the matter of fact is that the gap between the sunrise and sunset, the gap between the extreme east point of India and extreme west point of India is almost 2 hours. But because we have one national time, which is called Indian Standard Time, so across the country we follow one time zone, and this is because of our national imagination and national frame of imagination. And this is what print and others create. It creates simultaneity across space and time, and we cannot rescue ourselves from here. Finally, we are coming to the concluding part of this lecture. So, in terms of nationalism, then again he is speaking, Anderson is talking about anti-colonial nationalism and metropolitan nationalism. Metropolitan nationalism, for example, how nationalism emerged in the West, in the European context or in the American context, as well as how it emerged in the anti-colonial nationalism or the Creole kind of nationalism, in which particularly in Africa as well as in Latin America, you have Creoles. Creoles are the people who migrated from the mother countries or the metropolitan countries to the colonies, and now in the hierarchy of things, although culturally they identify themselves with the metropolitan countries, but physically they are not. So they are also, the Creoles are also becoming part of a form of anti-colonial movement or anti-colonial nationalist movement. So this is the reason why we have one official nationalism and one vernacular nationalism. Official nationalism is what is state-led. That is the reason why we call it nation state with a hyphen, whereas because here nation and state, they are becoming one and the same, whereas whenever it is grassroots cultural movements, it's very different. And in the next 2 lectures we are going to discuss vernacular nationalism, so I will not spend much time here. So now to conclude this, one of the critiques of the Anderson's work is that he is speaking a lot about print and print media in terms of capitalism. But what about orality, what about visual media, and what about other kinds of media? And whatever examples he is giving, it is coming primarily from the European and American context. So did other places in the world across the globe had similar experiences, or they had different experiences? So we will discuss about them in the later days of this course, but in the meantime you can read Partho Chatterjee, the Hobsbawm, Gellner and Brubaker's work, in order to understand more about it and in order to understand how Benedict Anderson's work completely transformed the way we look at and we identify nationalism and nation in the first place as a political and cultural construct, not just economic construct. Thank you.